Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining in. Today, we have with us somebody who is known as the godfather of intellectual property rights in India. He has quite the childlike enthusiasm about him when he talks about either intellectual property or chemistry or anything that actually satiates his curiosity and deep desire to learn. He's an innovative lawyer, an avid reader, and a mentor to many. None other than Mr. Pravin Anand, Managing Partner Anand Anand. Good evening, sir. Welcome on the show.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Vikas, I'm going to hand the baton over to you and go off for
Great.
a while and come back for uh, the second half of the interview then.
Super. Thanks, Tanisha. Hi, Praveen. How are you?
Great.
Good. Well, I think it's better to be known as the godfather of IP than the godfather as we know him.
I hate that expression, Godfather. I mean, I'm like a Don. And these days I've been seeing a lot of those Narcos type films on Netflix. So don't call me that. Somebody
Well,
in a magazine.
Someone's already put a comment up saying Rahul Shatru said it's Don Anand.
Tell him in that case he's been my junior, so he's one of those mafiasos. That makes him a mob guy.
Anyway, welcome to Unsuited. Really happy to have you on board and one of our special guests for this program. So we're going to start off with the whole journey to getting into IP, because you said we've talked before about how your early years were very fundamental in developing your passion for intellectual property and curiosity, and experimentation. So tell us a bit about your life as a child, and including, you were sent off to hostel very young, and how did those kind of experiences shape your life, and your kind of whole drive for curiosity and understanding intellectual property?
Yeah, I think my grandfather played a great role in shaping some of my early thinking, and perhaps in putting in me a desire for learning intellectual property and appreciating creative talent. He was both an inventor who'd make funny cosmetic creams and put them in the fridge, and the whole place would stink, and my grandmother and he would fight over that. And he was also an artist at the same time, and he'd make these disproportionate paintings of horses, which my father and my uncle, after their drinks, would have a look at and chuckle. And but he was very talented. Not only was he talented, he applied for patents. He opened offices. His was, I think, one of the first Indians to get into intellectual property in 1923, and opened offices in 5 cities. And those offices continued even after they acquired their own independent status. They continued, and the people who were running those offices became well-known law firms in the field. And so my grandfather, I was the only child in the family, and so he really spoiled me. There is a story about how he would make me sit on his lap, and he would ask me to, kind of use expletives for people, and he'd enjoy that and give me sips of his whiskey, and my parents would hate that. And I think the tipping point came one particular day when he asked me to throw up an egg, which was not properly, the yolk had broken, and I threw it, and apparently it was broken from the ceiling. And my parents said, "That's it. Now this boy will get into the hostel." And as a kid, I had all sorts of complexes. I used to suck my thumb, and I had absolute stage fright. And I went to the hostel, and there things changed. They completely changed. I remember when I was in the hostel, somebody called me a thumb sucker, and I hate him. And both he and me, we broke each other's glasses, and we both got what since St. Xavier School would give grey cards. 3 grey cards, and you were out of the school. And so it was a traumatic thing for me. But one thing it did, from coming second from the bottom of the class, I suddenly started to turn serious. And then I started doing quite well from class 5 onwards. And when I left the hostel and came home, my grandfather permitted me to have a chemistry lab at home. And it was a fairly rudimentary one at that stage, at that level. But we had a milkman who worked in a lab in Lajpat Nagar, and he would come giving me chemicals. And the result was I started to collect a lot of salts, which I would be able to look at and analyze without analysis, be able to tell this is barium sulfate, this is potassium nitrate, this is sodium carbonate, and so on. And that was good because that was my early interest in chemistry. And then eventually when I went into class 9, I did chemistry and then chemistry honors in St. Stephen's College. So that's how my interest went from my grandfather, traveled all the way into a love for sciences. I would say beyond chemistry, sciences. Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, I'm going to, again, refer back to The Godfather and the early kind of stage where if your grandfather's painting horses, maybe that was the early kind of setup for you becoming Godfather.
Not buying them, not buying and selling.
Or cutting their heads, like what's the famous scene from Godfather?
Never.
Yeah.
Never.
And
never
then,
any harm to animal. That's something that I've really kind of, it's a fundamental. No harm to any animal.
What got you on, because that early journey you're talking about, this passion for chemistry and experimenting, how did that translate into getting into law and IP law in particular then? That's quite a switch from becoming a chemist engineer to switching careers altogether.
I think it was my blackmailing father who suddenly came and sat when I was in St. Stephen's College. I got a scholarship to go to the US, to Duke's University, which is a very good university in chemistry. And everything was decided till he came and sat and made a long face, and he was sad. And I asked him what it was, and he said, "Oh, what will happen to the law firm?" And he pointed to a set of AIRs, because that's all we had at that time. What will happen to this great library? I mean, AIR is probably the smallest portion of our library today. But I'm just saying, and I came into that blackmail, and I said, all right. And I gave up my chemistry career, so to say, and turned to law. That's how it happened. But one thing that chemistry did for me was, or this lesson was, that if you give, you get back a lot. Because what happened later in life was I became a patent lawyer. And today I have chemistry cases every day of my life. So I got back my chemistry. So in a sense, I've seen it happen with others as well. I think it's a great learning. You give and you get back double.
Yeah. And you've been able to marry the two subjects and keep your passion alive.
Yes. In fact, one of the theories we have in our firm is to have hybrids. And a hybrid is a person who's law plus science, or law plus economics, or to get into things like valuation and things. So it's got to be a combination of at least two subjects. That's called a hybrid. And so we try to develop more and more hybrids. So if somebody is coming from an engineering side, we try to get them to do law. And if that's how we kind of promote a synergy between the lawyers and the engineers in the firm.
Very good. And then obviously you've developed a great kind of name brand in the IP field. And You've used judgments from foreign courts exposing Indian judges to a new line of thought with regards to IP law. You were counsel in several landmark IP cases, including those involving the first Anton Pillar order, the first Madeva injunction order, India's first SEP litigation, pre-suit mediation litigation involving Nokia, moral rights of artists, which was Amarnath Sehgal. And you've received the National Innovation Foundation Award from the Indian government in recognition of pro bono work for rural innovators at grassroots levels. You've really greatly contributed to IP law in this country and essentially helped shape its evolution in India. We've already discussed about how you moved from engineering to specializing in IP law, but how do you feel the law has evolved over the time that you've been practicing as an IP lawyer in India?
Well, there was a time when the law was just trademark law. You would hardly ever hear of anything beyond trademarks, perhaps a little copyright law. And today, almost every conceivable subject in law can be linked to intellectual property. You have people talking about intellectual property and human rights, and intellectual property and finance and economics, and intellectual property in almost it kind of mixes in every merger and amalgamation and every kind of business transaction. There's always an IP component. And why? Because each one of us is a creator. It's a different thing that some of us kind of create for the benefit of not only ourselves, but also for the enjoyment and use by others. And those creators are a small class. In India, there'd be just about 100,000 artists and inventors who have applied for patents, or lyric writers, song producers, or film producers, or journalists. Put them all together, 100,000 for a population of 1.3 billion. If you take out the below 10, that's still 750 million. If you take out 1 to 10 years, because they wouldn't qualify that in that league, but teenage upwards. And so you've got one person in 7,500 who create, and the rest of the 7,499 enjoy. So you obviously need people who will, more and more champions, who will try and help the creators as much as they can.
And is that statistic of 100,000, is that as of today, like we have 100,000 artists, creators with patents to their name in India today?
So this is the kind of calculation which I've done by taking all the associations and adding them on the assumption that the others, there's an artist in every home, there's a singer in every bathroom, but I'm not adding those people. I'm adding those that have made it their profession and are therefore doing it beyond their own families and personal being for the enjoyment of the others. So that's about 100,000. That's it.
Wow.
A country as large as ours.
And how does that, where does India rank in that kind of global statistic then? Because that doesn't seem like a very high number at all.
No, it doesn't. Except that the diversity in India is huge. So you have people who make saris. You have a look at those saris, and they are no less than a Leonardo da Vinci painting. You see the kind of intricate work on a Jamawar shawl, and you see we had a geographical indication case for a pashmina, for the protection of the word pashmina. And we found that the artist who came had taken 30 years to make one shawl. And that was so the cost of that shawl were his eyes, because
wow,
he took a second one of that kind. And so the panel, the geographical indication panel, they kind of asked, they said, what's the cost of this? And that's the answer was priceless. You can't put a cost on a thing like that. So that's the kind of contribution that India is making And that kind of diversity in art is not available to such an extent in even the most advanced countries in the world. So we may be in numbers lesser producers of creative works or inventors, but in terms of the diversity, much, much more.
That's an incredible kind of fact that, about the Pashmina maker that spent 30 years developing a piece of work. I mean, that's, especially in today's era, that's, very unheard of kind of fact for us to kind of digest, that you could spend so long developing one product and being so passionate about it.
That's right.
And then you also are a creator. So, we know that you've created, some people may not know, but you've created a board game, Anarist. Then there's a play called Brainchild that you produced. There's an IP comic book, Adventures of Mr. IP. You've got a compilation of legendary IP matters in the form of a coffee table book called Iponomics. And we know that the firm has been sponsoring the Raj Anand Moot Court competition for 18 years. So there's a lot of contribution that, that you personally and that the firm has put towards creating awareness regarding the importance of intellectual property. So just tell us more about why you feel this needs to be done in a country like India, and why you dedicate so much time to this.
I think just about 2 days ago, I came across this expression, which really reflects a lot of the Indian thinking on universal responsibility. When you say Sarve Bhavant Sukhma, or when you say universal responsibility in Buddhism, Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam means think beyond yourself. Think for the whole community. Think for all the others. And I think that's basically, one of the messages which His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been giving, and which I firmly believe in. I think it's very important for everyone to pay back to society. And I think, in a sense, it comes back to you fivefold. So when, for example, I've been involved in trying to spread the message, but as a result of that, the number of people who've got into intellectual property, it has opened up the field. More and more cases have been filed. India got recognized globally as, I wouldn't call it yet an IP superpower, but it's close to being there. Because when they think of one of the top 5 to 10 countries in intellectual property, India comes up there. And in certain areas, you can easily say that Indian law is stronger than even the US and the UK laws. For example, trademarks, concepts of transborder reputation. We protect well-known trademarks perhaps in a stronger way than most countries in the world. And our law books are full of illustrations of that principle. So I would say, paying back, you get back. And the idea is not to keep it to yourself. That was what was driving me all this while.
And is that something that's been there since you were young? Since you've seen your grandfather's influence and your father's after that? It's always about.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing, but psychologically, I grew up feeling guilty about having it all. There was, being the only child, all energies were concentrated on me. All the light was thrown on me. And I felt you'd be surprised, my closest friend was a chap called Richard Lim, very poor family. And I had friends like that. And so I'd look at them and I'd feel guilty about, being born in a reasonable, well-to-do family. And so I think it all started with feeling that I've got to do a lot more to pay back for what I've got. Us
That's an incredible message in any way. But I think even in today's environment, where obviously we're going through lockdown, and there's a lot of us that are privileged, and even in lockdown we can have a comfortable lifestyle. But there are hundreds of millions across the country that really need the support of people at the moment. So I think on a general level, then, that's a great message to just pass to those, watching the show as well.
Thank you.
And if it's, and then how do you, because you say, it's also for the fact that you're saying India is, one of the top 10 potentially, IP powerhouses at the moment. Is that a recent phenomena? Because I know when we've talked in the past, and if you go back 20, 30 years, it wasn't, India's not really been recognized as a IP kind of, powerhouse, or, that kind of label you've put to it. So when has that kind of tipping point come that India's taken IP more seriously and, can be recognized as a global contributor with regards to IP law?
I think it's been gradual, but there were some landmark events that happened, like the Code of Civil Procedure in 2002 underwent a change, and that dramatically altered the way courts would function. And then you had the Commercial Courts Act, which came in, and all sorts of judge reform. It was amazing how our judges did a magnificent job of taking control and coming up with reform to build in, at least as far as IP enforcement was concerned, we are shooting up like that. And then at the same time, we also joined international treaties and the TRIPS agreement and all that, and the Paris Convention. And so the turn of the century, we started to change things. The cases that went to court, the first damages, big IP damages case came in 2005. So you had the number of cases from 1972 to 2000 to 1995, when the TRIPS agreement was enacted. 23 years. The number of, although 50 times, the number of patent filings in India remained static between 3,500 and 4,000. So it was like a dead man's curve, a straight line. And then suddenly it jumped after we joined national treaties, and it started to go up. And today it's about 45,000 or plus 45 to 50,000 applications every year. That doesn't compare well with what China files, which is like 1.2 million. But
wow.
It was relative to ourselves, tremendous jump. And so it was happening all around 1995 onwards. And then it started to gather momentum. And when the Commercial Courts Act came, it's amazing how the judges reacted. They kind of started to make their own changes in the law, procedurally, started to come up with all sorts of creative and innovative dispute resolution systems and rationalize the system. And today we can finish an entire lawsuit within 1 to 2 years. And so when people think of filing an action, an innovator in America wants to sue somebody, let's say in China, they're thinking of filing in the US, in Germany, and in India. So India comes in the top 5 countries where they want to sue, which is great, which is a great recognition of the strength of our system.
I think that's incredible, because India's not normally recognized for the strength of its kind of legal capacity or legal enforcement. So globally, it doesn't, when you talk about, filing in India or enforcement, India doesn't normally rank that highly, but, kind of stories you're scripting about actually with regards to this, in particular, intellectual property, we really are seen as a kind of serious contributor to enforcement. I think that's a very powerful message.
I think what is missing is the kind of achievements that we are making at the legal, on the legal front. They are not being communicated to, let's say, the USTR. And so the US Trade Representative comes up with India on the super and special 301s, and that gets international publicity in every jurisdiction and has great credibility. So people look at that as an indicator. So we probably need that stitch where we need to put this information and make sure that it reaches the right people, so that the reports show us as, of course, we've been changing. Our people, our diplomats are doing a good job of trying to change, and our rankings in global innovation and others have been increasing, and we've been doing much better. But it could be that we are in the top 10. It could get there. We have that potential, and I think it's got to be a combination of what we are already achieving and how that's being communicated globally.
Great. So that moves on to nicely to a question I was going to ask you. That you've primarily represented a lot of global brands and inventors when it comes to IP matters, especially with regards to the India issues. The question I was going to ask is, do you feel that there will come a time when you could be representing some of the best that India has to offer overseas? And what needs to happen in India for that trend to accelerate?
No, I think that's a misnomer. That's wrong, because we have a healthy mix of Indian and foreign clients. And I think that's not only is a fact, but it's also necessary. Because if you don't have Indian clients, you can't offer reciprocity to foreign law firms and foreign clients who are, in turn, foreign law firms particularly, looking for reciprocal business. And if you don't have Indian clients, you can't do that. So we do have a 40-60 kind of a ratio.
Okay.
Already. And so all the individual creative talent in this country, the great designers and the fashion designers and the great music composers and lyric writers and their collecting societies and the individual inventors and the big Indian corporate companies, the SMEs and startups, they're all, I've been representing all of them depending on what kind of issues are involved and what is their need.
What do you think though needs to accelerate in India for us to, like we all know the kind of global brands that they're available globally, they're available in India, but for India to be seen as a powerhouse of invention and creativity, and then to have those matters represented around the world, what do you think needs to happen to the community here?
I think one of the most important things is that in India, we have not given the kind of message we did when we came up with, and I think that was certainly something very positive when we came up with an innovation policy, a national innovation policy. That was a great achievement. But we need, and I think CPAM and the DPIIT have been doing a great job of spreading the message. And I think that process can be accelerated further. But it's easy to say, I know how difficult it is for the government also to reach out in such a vast country. What I think is really missing is the correct ambassadors who convey to the world how strong things really are, or how much of innovation is actually taking place in this country. That's one thing which is missing. The other thing which is missing is the number of patent applications that this country files for its size and for the creative talent that it has. And I think in other countries like China, of course, they've done it in a different way, where they obliged companies to file a certain number of patents. Here, in countries like Philippines, the head of the state went and gave a message that patents are very important for our country. So a couple of sentences here and there in our top leaders' messages about the importance of not only innovating, but of legally protecting those innovations, which give us the wealth, without which we don't have the wealth. We are not able to commercialize our innovations. So in order to get that wealth element in, you need to apply for a patent. In countries like the US, they have a Bayh-Dole Act, where if there's public funded money used to invent, you have to show that something came out of it, deliverable. And if there is a patentable subject matter and nobody is applying for it, then the source which funded the money gets the right to apply for it. So you have acts like that. So we need those little pieces to make sure that whatever is being innovated is actually translated into patent filing.
Okay, and you mentioned like China's doing like 1.2 million patent filings a year, and
Yes.
India was around 45,000, 95 onwards. What is it currently at the moment? India per annum?
The number of patent applications are about that much, about 45 to 50,000.
Oh, it's still about the same kind of number. Okay.
That's right.
It
goes up by about 7% every year.
Okay, and you think once we start, once we kind of lobby at government level or educate them to educate the rest of us about patent applications, we could see that number kind of shoot up?
Yes, I think the number of startups, if I remember correctly, is about 62 million. If there are 62 million startups, one patent application per startup, if they could just try. And I tell you from my personal experience, I used to go on morning walks with a gentleman to the Humayun's tomb who had a very extensive pen business, writing implements business. And I just told him that he must apply for patents and trademarks. And he didn't know the distinction between patents and trademarks. But after that discussion, we had 1 or 2 meetings, and he applied. He just went and told his people, you have to apply. I don't care how. The CEO giving that message meant first year, 3 patents were applied. The next year, 25. They learned how to read patents, how to distinguish them, how to read claims, how to draft them, how to apply overseas. Once they got into that rut, they started filing huge number of patent applications. And a foreign company wanted to take over their business for a huge sum of money. I'm just saying that these things have happened. You need to energize the top management, particularly the CEO.
Yeah, I mean, that was a very valuable walk to Humayun's tomb then for your client. We're talking about innovation, right? And obviously in your law firm, Anand Anand is very well known for innovation. You're known to have hugely modernized the firm, how it functions. You've brought technology into day-to-day operations from quite a long time ago. You've also, not only have you invested in technology and AI, obviously I know Rajiv very well. You've got a CEO who you brought in from the technology industry to come be your CEO. And in recent years, you've gone on to win, the FT Innovative Lawyer Award twice. So how do you think, one, technology's had an impact on the way you've run the firm, and how have you kind of molded the firm to be recognized as a global innovator within the law firm fraternity?
I think since we act for technology companies, we need to have the absolute cutting technology in our firm, which means even, for example, when we make court appearances, we need to have the best virtual hearing equipment these days and all the networking that goes with it, all the software and hardware and firewalls and other security systems. That's one aspect. The other is we realized as a firm that if we are into patents, we must get the engineers and the lawyers to work together. So many years ago, when I went and I spoke at the IIT Delhi on why engineers need to get into IP law, people laughed. They actually thought, but that was the beginning of a study done, and we took in people, and it took about 8 years for us to train the engineers and the lawyers to get along with each other. And we started recruiting them. Now we have a lot of engineers and lawyers who work together. The engineers start to do law, and they they work in beautiful synergy, and that gives us a lot of strength.
Well, if it only took you 8 years to get engineers and lawyers to work seamlessly together, I think you should also get into marriage counseling, those kind of areas, because that's a great way of being able to get two different mindsets together.
Yeah, I think that culturally, the engineers and the lawyers, they were completely different. The engineers wanted to do everything on the laptop, and the lawyers were very notebook and book oriented, and the engineers would want to come in early and go early, and the lawyers would want to work till very late in the night. So small things like that, and of course the bigger issues as well.
Yeah. And that leads on to obviously, well, we'll get on to the next point. But then, with regards to technology, you said obviously you've worked with technology firms, you understand the kind of value it brings to the business. Any kind of trends that you can see with regards to the kind of integration of technology and law? What future trends could we kind of potentially anticipate coming in the next few years?
You'll have a lot more people coming out of the IITs, having done the institutes that do like Kurukshetra, not Kurukshetra, Kharagpur, which create hybrid, which means people who've got multiple law and science talent. I think we'll see more and more of that genre coming into law, because today technology is not only in the field of patent law, but even in copyright law. You have those complex website cases of intermediary liability and all that. They involve a lot of complex technology. Will you give me a second? My battery is suddenly dying out. I'll just get that charger.
Sure.
Bhaiya, jaldi charger. यहाँ लगा दो. जल्दी. Sorry about that.
That's all right. That's technology impacting the law right now.
Yeah, but quick solution.
We've also talked about how you've managed to integrate a lot of hybrids into the law firm, and I think you're very well known as being kind of one, I think, the rarer cases, especially in India, where you have these hybrid lawyers and a lot of kind of non-lawyers coming into the business and really being a core part of what you deliver.
So, for example,
go ahead. So I was just saying, what kind of leadership style do you need to have to do that? Because that's not easy to one, be open to having non-lawyers retrain or kind of contribute to the way the firm's being run. So one is bringing them in, and two, how do you make sure that keeps evolving in a kind of in a way that supports the growth of the business and doesn't lead to a lot of kind of infighting everywhere?
I think you have to learn how to manage egos, because there can be a lot of clashes of egos, and you have to learn to give due credit to everyone, because everybody has a set of skills. They may not be the same that the other has, but they may be different. And to learn to appreciate how the skill sets can be used in combination without clashes. I think that's the primary role of a leader. Apart from, of course, wanting to learn himself all the time, because I do believe that I'm a student every day of my life. And you won't believe this, but I sometimes feel I know so little about IP. I actually believe that in my heart. I mean, when I read cases, I feel sometimes feel depressed that I haven't read this and I haven't read that and I haven't read that, and I've got to cover this and this. And I think it's important to want to have that curiosity to learn, and that hunger to learn more and more. And that, in a sense, gets you closer to the engineers, that gets you closer to the junior lawyers, and you are able to get them to work together because they kind of like it also, and they're able to get along if you're in admiration of what they're doing. I think
that's a great message. Yeah, I mean, managing ego is obviously very important for the more senior you get, and especially as the one they all look up to. So I think that's a great kind of message or trait to communicate to others that are kind of accelerating up their own path. And also, like you said, just recognizing the talent at the bottom, you know, and really kind of involving them in that whole process of how you grow the firm and how you work together.
Yes.
So we're going to go, well, we have a question. I'm going to ask this question we have from the audience, Debanshi. She says, what's your success mantra and what motivates you?
Success mantra. I think my ability to lose bias. One, whenever a bias develops, I can see it developing. I'm able to neutralize it in my own mind. One. Two, focus. I've always had this tremendous focus on IP. I remember when I was in class 5, Principal Father Kunankal came to our class and asked us in St. Xavier's School what we wanted to be. And people said, I want to be Superman. Somebody said, I want to be a firefighter. Somebody said, I want to go to the moon. And I said, I want to be a patent lawyer. And
how old were you? This is when you were, which grade?
I think 11 or so. And because it was in the family. You would hear words like patent every day. So when I said that, everybody laughed. Maybe it was patent leather or something. I forget what it was. But everybody laughed and made a lot of joke of that. But now take me 25 years later. 25 years later, I call up a friend, Ravinder Oswal, in the US, having gone to San Francisco for a day or two. I called him up. He hadn't heard my voice in 25 years, but immediately recognized. I just said, hello. And he said, hi, Pravin. And I said, how did you know? You didn't have my number, nothing? He says, oh, you were the guy who said in class 5 to the principal that you wanted to be a patent lawyer, and you did that. So he saw it as something that impacted him tremendously. And he saw it as a quality. That's when I realized that focus was a strength. I think it's important to know what you want to do.
Yeah, and have that laser sharp focus on following, you know, your kind of passion or the kind of end goal that you need to get to.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Moving back to the more creative side. So you've met with many innovators, creators, artists. So tell us a little bit more about a few of them or their products and works which have left you with a distinct memory of either their product or their unique, or their mind being so intriguing.
So they've been, I mean, from one end to another. Some have been very creative people. The chap who started Gene Junction in India, Bhomi Kamath, and unfortunately he's no more. But Bhomi Kamath one day came to me and said that he's come up with an air-conditioned suit. So I said, what is that? So he said, you wear your suit and everything and it's air-conditioned. So I asked him, I said, so you're going to put holes inside the garments? He says, yeah. I said, how are you going to do that with, let's say, Arrow shirts? He says, yeah, we'll have to enter into contracts with them. I said, all right. What about the differential temperature? Here, it'll be air-conditioned. And on top, the heat of Delhi, 45 degrees, you'll have people falling ill. He said, yeah, I've got to talk to doctors about that. So the focus of the guy was just his air-conditioned suit, nothing more. So I had another guy who came and said, you know, I've come up with this butane, kind of a fuel, a substitute, which I said, what's so great about it? He says, it doesn't explode. So he said, can I give you a demonstration? I said, all right. So we went down to my mom's kitchen and he started to fix the cooking range with that. And my mom came out and she saw that and she said, what's he going to do? And before you knew it, he opened the gas and it started to leak in the room and you could smell it. And then he started to light a matchstick. And my mom and others, everybody said, what are you doing? There'll be an explosion. He said, no. And nothing happened. And so we said, wow, this is going to be in the newspapers. This is great breakthrough news. Till I realized 10 days later that the calorific value of one butane bottle was not good enough to heat a glass of water. You needed 10 bottles to cook a meal. And we had a Maharaja who once came with a perpetual motion machine. So he said, this will keep the vehicle going. I said, but that's against the third law of thermodynamics. He says, no. And he pulled out a German text where it had said in German, and I couldn't understand, but he translated it as meaning that that was possible. I said, what about a prototype? A couple of days later, he came back with a prototype and he took it down to his ambassador car. Of course, it didn't work, but that was a Maharaja and his invention. Having said all this, you also had a chap from Chandigarh who came, Intel gas guards, Mr. Gupta. He came up with a device where the gas, you could know whether it's half an hour left or 1 hour left or 2 days left on a meter. And what had he done? He'd taken the rack and pinion arrangement of a watch and put it inside a meter. And that was fantastic. So when I saw there was promise there, I said, listen, it was very early years of patent law in India. And so I said, let's go to, you go to England, I'll give you the contact name and you get it drafted there. Because I don't believe that we'll be able to do a world-class job here. He said, all right. He said, you come with me. Anyways, after a lot of persuasion, I went with him and A. Thornton and Company in UK, they applied for a patent. After that, he flew to Denmark and he got the world's largest producer to place an order for some 2 million pieces of that product.
Wow.
So, and just on the force of that UK application. So you have success stories as well. You have disaster stories and you have success stories.
Yeah,
I think what's important is that these success stories must be told. They must be told. And there are many of them. And that's how people will feel encouraged to innovate themselves. Because sometimes what happens, a person looks at it and he says, oh, this company could get a patent only for this little slit. Then why can't I? I've done a lot. And then you find that they start to apply themselves.
Yeah, I think that's very, very good. I mean, obviously, you've got the quack stories and you've got the success stories. And part of the whole journey of creation and invention is, trying again. You have many failures and then you have some successes. But like you said, we have to keep educating, the community and individuals about why you should patent and look after your work. So, Pravin, thank you very much for this first part of the section. It's been very inspiring to hear your journey and also the journey of IP law in India, kind of following in suit with your own journey. We're going to move over to Tanisha, who is while you are the godfather of IP law, she is our godmother.
Don't use that word. So don't use that word.
We are bringing on our godmother to take over round 2 and round 3. So I'm going to leave it to Tanisha to take over. I think she's hidden the horse's head, so you may not see it in screen right now.
Hi, thanks, Vikas. I'm back. Hello, Mr. Anand. I'm going to be very nice to you, particularly because we have a lot of IP work pending for the program called Unsuited. So, I'm going to be very kind because IDEX and Grey Matter are going to come to you for all the work we need to do around copyright and trademark. Okay, so.
Mind if I have a sip?
Please do. More than a sip. So our next segment, take a breather, let me talk. Our next segment is called the demonstration round, okay? What we need to do in this round is encourage you to show us your creative side, and which we can very clearly see there is no dearth of when it comes to you. So we're very excited to see what you have to show us today. I think you're multifaceted, right? So you have more than just one thing to demonstrate today, is that right? Hi, can you see me and hear me, Mr. Anand? Akash, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Visible?
I think Pravin's frozen a bit.
Okay. I think we lost him there. We will just, please bear with us. Mr. Anand will be back shortly. He's gone off to prepare for the demonstration round. His feed has paused. That's correct. Rahul tells us that his feed has paused. Yes, it has. Please bear with us. He's going to be back shortly. Until then, let's just wait momentarily, please. Apologies.
Tanisha?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah, I think you scared him when you asked him to represent us. When you're like, we're looking for him to be our IP lawyer.
Represented far more, complex cases and more complex people than us. So I don't think that's really the worry. I think he's gone to get his hands dirty with all that he wants to demonstrate today, because he just has so much skill to show off that he's unsure of what to pick. So I think that's what he's gone off to.
Or he's thinking he's got a bunch of more quacks he's going to have to work with.
That too. So I think we're just going to have to wait momentarily to just check in. Maybe he's trying to dial back in.
Yeah. So Akash is doing that. So Akash is just chasing him up.
It's actually a great time to go get your tea, coffee, or like a bio break, because usually this show goes on straight up for an hour and a half. So this kind of a break is sometimes almost useful, right?
So for the audience, what we have next, while Pravin is joining back, we have our godmother Tanisha, who's going to make sure Pravin does a demo for you of one of his many skills, and then she's going to be on to the interrogation, which is meant to be a kind of like, given we're working with a legal fraternity, isn't often rapid fire. We end up talking a lot on that bit. But it's great questions that she's going to be kind of delving much more into his life and asking quite pertinent questions. So that's the super fun bit you want to stay around for.
So in fact, I suggest we go ahead and demonstrate what Mr. Anand has to demonstrate in the time that he's trying to join in. Why don't we go ahead and, tell everybody to take a look at what Hia has to share. Hia, why don't you go ahead and share this beautiful poem that Mr. Anand has written. Let's take a look at that, and maybe when he joins us back, he can tell us more about it. I think that should be good, right? Hia, you can go ahead and share your screen, please.
Let me kiss their feet. Hey, we all knew Newton. He told us why the apple doesn't fall to the sky. Gravity. And Einstein. Why little study is so long and lots of play so short. Relativity. Don't forget the inventors. The ancients invented fire and the wheel and bricks to build our homes. We need to eat. Who made the plow? And they made tables and chairs and plates. We need to dress and groom. Whence came the soap, the brush and the comb? We needed time. Peter Henley invented the watch. We needed to study and research. Janssen gave us the microscope and the telescope, not Galileo, but Lippershey. We need to travel from the wheel to the drone, cars, ships and planes. Don't forget the train. But first, let me wear my shoes. I'm ill now. Who made me healthy again? Fleming gave penicillin. Who gave us light like the sun? Thomas Edison. My computer and the internet, and the tools for things to get. Hammers, drills, levers and the saw.
from any idea you could draw. But I have a richer need, my music and films and books to read. Oh God, these creators I want to meet. Bless them. Let me kiss their feet. Let me kiss their feet.
Wow, that was beautiful. So, Mr. Anand, you're back. Thank you for joining us. Sorry about that minor technical glitch we had, but welcome back. You are on mute, Mr. Anand, so you'll have to unmute yourself, please. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now.
Good. Did we lose much time?
No, we didn't actually, because we used the time very well and efficiently, like all lawyers do, to play that beautiful poem and that wonderful video that you've come up with. So we'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about that now.
Well, I mean, it speaks for itself. There was a book which I was doing for my grandson on inventors. And of course, he's just 1 year old. Okay. So there's no question of him seeing that or understanding it for a long, long time. Sure. But when I was writing that book, I started to research a bit and found some very interesting facts about inventors. I mean, despite being interested in the field for such a long time, there's so little that one actually knew about the real stories behind inventions. And so that's what led me to kind of put something in a very simplistic way. And this is a very rudimentary kind of thing that I got inspired to make on the World Intellectual Property Day. But the field of inventors and writing about them and is so vast that we could actually have an inventors museum and take our school children and others and families with their children to go and get inspired by inventors. I mean, it's so surprising that when you look around you, right, from an aircraft to a ship to a cycle to a computer, none of this has been invented in India. And it's so surprising that a lot of these inventions have been made by Indians overseas. So we have the skills, but we do not have the right environment right now to either appreciate or to convert into a protectable invention. And I think that's what inspired me to write that poem.
That poem is just beautiful, and the artwork accompanying it completely does justice. And I think the way you've narrated the poem is also it's really impactful. So I'm glad that you shared this with us, and I'm sure our audience is very, very thrilled to have watched something like this, because it truly tells us that you're not just an IP lawyer, you yourself are quite the innovator.
Truly tells you that I'm an amateur.
Not really. It's like you said, it's rudimentary, it's basic, but yet it literally it's got capacity to just light up your mind, right? And that's what you're, I think, trying to do at some level, even with your franchise.
I think it's one important message is that there are people who got so much more talent. I mean, my talent is this much. But there are people with such great skills and talents. They should use that skill and talent to try and spread this message that be creative, be innovative, and you'll be able to take this country to a completely new high.
Correct.
Because
And do it in the country. Don't.
do it in
The
exactly.
problem of brain drain, I think, is
Correct.
something that we wrestle with very often as a country, right?
Correct.
I think now with the threat of the visas being cancelled in the US,
Yes.
and the potential that a lot of people may actually come back, I was secretly very excited because I'm like, good, the best of our brains will probably come back to us and we stand to benefit with that.
Correct.
Provided, of course, we know how to treat them well and protect their creations, like you rightly said earlier in your interview.
True.
Super. And what else do you have for us? Because I refuse to believe that your creativity is limited to a poem and a video. So what else are you going to do for us today?
Well, I'm not going to cook a meal for you, surely, although I'm extremely fond of food, but I never learned how to cook.
Okay.
And I've been learning some paintings because I used to do art when I was in school,
Right.
and I was fairly good at that school level.
Mhm.
And but that never remained in touch till I got a professor to try and help.
Mhm.
And he would come on Sundays to teach, and I started making some paintings, but like I said, very amateurish and not so great. Somehow that professor thought that it could develop into something nicer. Um, but I believe at the moment I can't do much because I've suddenly run from one floor to another to get the internet connection right.
No problem.
I have a piece of paper here.
Okay.
I have a piece of paper, and at times I would just kind of come out with these literally these 1 minute paintings,
Mhm.
or just a kind of a sketch in just less than a minute.
Okay.
The idea was to kind of capture okay, that's done. So so I mean it just anything, a horse, a mountain, a seaside, those paintings and if you start to do it, give a little more time.
Mhm.
With acrylics, you do a fast acrylic and you can finish a painting in one session as opposed to oils. And so I'd like to do those fast paintings. There's a term in which I'm forgetting today for these super fast paintings.
Okay.
And I just enjoy that very much. And a lot of our time in court when we used to just wait for the matter to come up,
Correct.
go in doing this. In fact, I started to create slips called court art. And so every day there was a slip which would have some painting and it would be numbered and put away. And I don't know where that's lost now, but that was quite a way of listening to what the previous matter was, what proceedings were going on. And at the same time, those doodles became some form of a court art.
Correct. And it's also therapeutic, isn't it? Like to just, it actually, I find that it enhances my thinking and my listening ability when I'm simultaneously just fiddling with a pen or a pencil on paper.
So, in our firm, we had a book art competition.
Okay.
And so we got 12 well-known painters to take legal books,
Okay.
like the CPC, an old discarded CPC, and
Right.
convert it into art. So I remember somebody from Mumbai, I forget the name now, folded pages and made it into a butterfly.
How nice.
And so the pages of the two hard covers are still intact, but the inner pages have been converted into a butterfly. And another person, a Japanese, made cutouts. And when you would go from one page to another, you would enter a house and you would go from room to room. It was very interesting. And those are exhibited in our firm.
So this is all still sitting at the firm in that big library.
There are 12 of them, 12 of them which were commissioned. That's book art. So it's a collection of book art.
How nice. So there is somebody here called Naval Anand, and he tells us that the name of the painting that you were looking for, done in one session, is called Alla Prima. Is that the word you were looking for?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
That's
okay.
right.
Thank you, Naval. We've made a note of that. Okay, super. So you can clearly sketch or paint. There's
Naval Anand happens to be my father.
oh,
Yeah.
okay.
He's the great man. He's the great man who gave me the opportunity and to argue a matter on day one of being a lawyer.
Oh wow. So this is your father watching. This is him writing in, is it?
I'm sure it must be him.
Oh, good
So
evening. Good
I've never
evening.
known a second Naval Anand, and there cannot be a second Naval Anand.
Okay,
Because
then
he's the best father that you can ever have.
how sweet. And Father's Day just went by, so it's great that you make that reference. Good evening, Mr. Anand Senior.
He's
Thank you
92.
so much
He's
for
92
watching.
years of age,
Wow.
and he's an inspiration to a lot of IP professionals in this country. And the greatest thing about him, even when there were opportunities when I was fighting against somebody and there was some bad blood or whatever, my father would treat my opponents and people, the ones who were even who had been a little harsh, he would treat them with so much of love and compassion and bless them, and that he's somebody who has to be met. You can't imagine what a
Wonderful.
great soul he is. Yeah.
Maybe we should catch up with him in our next season. Then we'll probably invite him and your sons, and we'll
You
probably
must,
yes,
you must invite the family,
yes,
and
absolutely.
I have a beautiful grandson.
Wonderful. So he can join in and say hello probably as well. Super.
Absolutely.
Thank you for talking about your father. Thank you, Mr. Anand, for writing in and also watching. We really appreciate it. Moving on to our third segment, Mr. Pravin Anand, called the interrogation. I'd really recommend that you drink some water, coffee, or tea. Take a sip or two.
Why you going to bash me up?
Bash
Some
you
sort
up.
of bashing.
because then that IP work we spoke of may not go well. So I'm not doing that, but I'm going to ask you to be really quick to respond as briefly as you can, and of
Right.
course, please bring your creativity like you always do. So that's going to be the request.
Sure.
So are you ready, Mr. Anand, for the
Sure.
interrogation?
Yeah.
Okay, super. So your first question then, is there a connection between creativity and spirituality in your view?
Oh, I had a conference which I conducted once,
Okay.
where Sri Ravi Shankar spoke with knowledge workers, journalists, scientists, etc. We tried to explore this connection, and certainly there is a connection. What the elements of that connection are won't come in this much of limited time.
Correct.
It's very
Sure.
vast, but it's beautiful. That conference went off fantastically well.
And is there somewhere we can view that, or what happened there?
We've got a videotape on that. I don't know whether anybody has a facility for a videotape these days, but if I can get out something, I will certainly send it to you.
Please do. Or even like a short write-up on just what happened in that session would be great.
Yes.
I think a lot of creators would want to know. So that'll be great. Thanks. So moving on to your next question. How many people at the firm right now, partners and lawyers, roughly?
About
Ballpark.
about 130.
130. What we understand is that about 100 firms or 100 plus firms have mushroomed from the lawyers that have at some point been at Anand Anand or trained with Pravin Anand, right? How
More
does
than
that make
125.
125, is it? Wow. How does that make you feel?
I think it gives me a lot of competition because each one of them is better than the next. They're really good.
I'm sure.
That's a lot of competition, but it makes me feel good because one of the positives that came out of that was that the world of IP became so rich, and it opened up many doors, and the
Correct.
world started to look at India as a good IP destination.
Correct.
That's what it did. And the good thing is that all these firms, they're very ethical, and they believe in doing high quality ethical work, which speaks volumes for them and how they've conducted themselves. And I think they've contributed hugely to this infrastructure of IP which we've developed.
That is fantastic. It is the true hallmark of a mentor when you respond like this. So thank you, and thank you for making IP law so much more accessible in the country. Moving on to your next question, we know you love your coffee latte, and we know that you love reading, because no matter how many books you get, I feel like you're always going to be unhappy because you've not managed to read enough, right? So if I were to ask you to choose between your Costa latte coffee, a cup of that, a hot brewing cup of that, and a really great read, maybe non-IP, maybe like an autobiography or something, what would you pick?
Both go together. They while you read, you sip your coffee.
Perfect. Okay. And now with the monsoons coming up, that's like the ideal combination, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Your next question then, Mr. Anand, what are your 3 strengths?
Strengths, I would say one of the most important strengths is the focus, which I earlier spoke about to Vikas. I would also say that I have managed to bring people together. I feel that's important because I try to recognize the good in each one. I would say that my ability, as I also mentioned earlier, to neutralize negatives and bias,
Right.
and to think positive about things. And I think most important of all is I don't dislike anything, pretty much. Except, of course, parval. Parval in food, I cannot have.
Oh, Parval made it to the hate list.
But otherwise, there's the word like hate. In fact, I actually tried to tell my children when they were growing up not to use the word hate in the family.
Okay.
We hate the word hate. And you don't even say that. You say you don't use the word hate.
Fair. It is a very strong word. So you're right there. That's a good takeaway. Thank you. So my next question then, what is the best practical joke that you have ever played on someone or someone has played on you? Either way.
Well, in St. Stephen's College, you have a PG Wodehouse week.
Okay.
And in that, Winterfest or something. And you have a PG Wodehouse contest where practical jokes can be performed by students. So what I did was I got Professor Bhargav and Janki Amma of Professor Bhargav's of the physics department and Janki Amma of Miranda House.
Okay.
Wedding cards circulated to 40, 50 professors all over Delhi University. And on one Sunday at the chapel of St. Stephen's College, dozens of people landed up with flowers and gifts and in their best suits. And Nurul Hassan, the then education minister, called up Professor Rajpal and started congratulating him. And Professor Rajpal was steaming. And he wanted to throw out the student who'd performed this practical joke. But Professor Dwivedi, who'd approved it, shielded, but I got the first prize. That was the best.
Oh my God. Wow, that is really brave of you.
They were very naughty.
I'm curious, did the professors actually then take a cue and fall in love and get married? The lady Miranda House and your professor? No. Okay, fair. Okay, that's a good one. Thank you. The next question then, what do you do to make the world a better place?
I think to protect creative people has been, if you call it a one-line motto,
sure.
That's a very important thing. I believe that I should try and spread the message.
Super. Okay. My next question then, what profession do you think doesn't get enough respect or credit in India?
I think at the present moment, probably doctors and health workers.
Very
relevant. COVID times. But otherwise, generally in good times, sweepers, people who clean toilets. I used to ask myself often that Mahatma Gandhi would sweep his, kind of clean his own toilets.
Right.
Would I be able to do it? And I've tried my hand at it. It's difficult. And I must confess. And so the people who do that, at one point of time, I thought like a foolish guy. They should be the richest people in society because they're doing things that you can't do, you know. So I just think that they deserve a much better deal.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. In fact, I'm going to add on to that if you don't mind. You know, the people who pick up our garbage, we often call them the kachrawalas, right? And my friend Neha, who's also here and watching, she reminded me gently once that we are the ones who are making the kachra. So we are the kachrawalas. They are actually cleaning. So they're the cleaners. Hum kachra banate, wo uthate. So I felt like that was really, really powerful and it really stayed
Yes.
with.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, super. So your next question then, if you could snap your finger in an instant and make the world a better place, what would you snap your finger into?
Obviously, take away COVID
Take away COVID.
at the moment.
Thank you. That will be wonderful. True, true. Okay. Your next question then, what energizes you about IP law? In one sentence, please.
Energizes.
Mhm.
I went to a conference where prizes were being given to creators
Mhm.
of IPRS,
Okay.
Collecting Society. And the level of the room was a foot higher than normal because the creative talents in that room had created so much of energy that they were actually floating. And I could feel that. And I think that creativity of creative people, that energy of creative people, that rubs off on you.
Energizes you.
And it's really, really important when you are within their company, you see that creativity flying around. It is a different experience altogether.
I'm sure it is. Okay, super. Your next question then, Mr. Anand, how do you interact with somebody who disagrees with you, where there's conflict? How do you deal with that?
Well, to start with a smile.
You
Um,
learned that from your father?
then yes, my father is known to have, you know, like you have talk of a green finger. He's got
Right.
a settlement finger. He can settle any dispute. There was a dispute in the Gurudwara in our colony, and he got that settled. So those are kind of most complex disputes he can get resolved.
Okay.
He's a champion at that. And I think, therefore, conflicts, you got to listen. You got to hear. You got to use dialogue. You got to try and go with the flow of your opponent. And try then to lead him to a corner where he self-realizes
Hmm.
the, uh, uh, the depth of his argument.
Fair, fair. Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
I don't believe in confrontation of the kind that would lead to friction.
Okay.
It's important to be transparent, to voice your opinions, but you must know where to draw the line, where it starts to turn sour. You have to stop there. That's very important. That control is very important.
Very well said. Thank you. Okay, your next question then. If everyone was mentally incapable of lying, okay, nobody can lie. How do you think that would change the world of intellectual property law?
Wow, we'd win all the cases.
because you as a firm represent
Only,
you're very
only right owners.
only right owners. Correct. I knew this. Okay.
I mean, we are involved in defendants' actions once in a while, but
Okay.
those are only cases which involve an industry issue or collectively involve a huge group
Sure.
or there's an aberration in the law that needs to be corrected, something along.
Understood. Okay. Okay. Your next question then. Your favorite personal invention that mankind has enjoyed thus far, in your view?
100% the internet.
The internet.
Yeah, without, I mean, today you had the physical reality and you had a world of dreams, which is also some sort of a reality.
Correct.
Because it actually happens, a dream actually happens. And then you have a new virtual world, the internet world, which is a different world. And see, today we are surviving on that.
We're able to do this.
Yeah.
We're able to have this conversation
Correct.
on the internet. You're right. Okay.
I remember when I was a kid growing up, we had Sinclair ZX Spectrum computers and then Commodore 64 computers. So when I got into computing, it was at that low level. And from that, we suddenly saw PCs come and then networking come and then see how it grew to the internet. And so all this digital climb is a great story.
It is, and not just for somebody like you personally, but also professionally, right? Because at this point, I'm sure you're attending a lot of virtual court.
Yes, absolutely. Every
Okay.
day. Yeah.
Okay, super. Now moving on, if you could give your parents one piece of advice about you before you were born, what would you say to them?
Do not feed this baby. He will grow. He will grow. He will grow, and you won't be able to control it.
Okay, which brings me to my next question. What is your favorite cuisine? We know you're a foodie. What is your favorite cuisine?
Chinese, without a doubt. Yes. Oh,
Okay.
I just love Chinese. I've had crazy stories on Chinese food.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. So that's going to lead me to my next question. What is the extent you can go to enjoy good food? Please share like a,
See, there's no, when you talk of passion, there's
Mhm.
nothing like extent.
okay.
Passion takes you sky high. So,
Okay.
being to a country for 3 hours, from one country to another country, from Geneva to France,
Mhm.
to have pigeon and orange sauce, and at a restaurant. So, a friend of mine who was a diplomat there, he took me, and we both got caught because I didn't have a visa. And when the person heard that we were going to such and such restaurant, which was a famous one,
Right.
he said, all right, 3 hours. I give you 3 hours to come back. So he just excused us. He was a food lover. So a foodie, he appreciated that restaurant. So, and once I traveled 300 kilometers in one day to eat at the Old Dover's Inn in the US. Of course, somebody was taking me there, one of our clients. But the point is, these food excursions. Um, they're only, I guess, it's only a tip of the iceberg. Like this, whenever we would go to the US, we'd stop one day in London to be able to go to Chinatown for a good Chinese meal.
Wow. Okay, so clearly a lot of passion, not just for the IP law, but also for food, as you have
As you
clearly
can,
depicted,
as you
right?
can,
Okay.
as
Okay.
you can see.
Going back to your former love, IP, what are, according to you, some of the most common IP, IP law flouting that we do without even realizing that we do it? Like, if you could give us the top three, maybe. That we, when I say we, I mean just the public at large.
I think not so much photocopying now,
Okay.
but more downloading, streaming, music, films, etc.
Okay.
Essentially that. I remember when my kids were growing up,
Mhm.
my son had some CDs and VCDs, etc., with some films, and I got them to destroy them, and they
Mhm.
happily did that. And after that, my kids have not used pirated stuff, not one day, because my logic was that if we are getting people arrested for copyright violation, then I can't be doing it at my home,
Correct.
and that's very important.
Fair. Fair. Okay. Your next question then. If you could go back in time and uninvent something, what would you erase from history completely?
Guns, I think.
Guns? Yeah, that's a good one.
Yes.
Okay. Your next question then. If you were tasked with the job of making school more fun, but it still has to be as effective as a teaching tool, right, to students, what would you introduce? One thing that you would introduce?
I take a lot of people to schools
Mm-hmm.
to give them practical side of things. For example, or I take the school children to see how a film is being made, or I take them to a studio to see, or to a lab, how materials are tested, how uh, mm, take them to a stock exchange to see how a stock exchange works. So to expose them to the practical side of things. When I was kind of doing law, I realized that we didn't have those kind of opportunities to go work in a factory, to go work in a lab, to go work in, at a film set, to be able to see the practical side. because that gives you a totally different insight. And
Correct.
that's why a lot of the government officers who spent their time in the villages and the panchayats, they have a deep understanding of how the society works because they've seen it at that level.
Ground level. Correct.
For example, my son asked me the other day that what exactly is the difference between a village and a town, and it's defined. It's got to do with the population, and these are all objectively defined things which you learn through a practical exposure. That practical exposure is very important in schools.
Understood. Okay, that's a good one. The next question then. You've said that the power of observation is very important. Can you tell us where you learned this and why you think it's so important?
Oh, Father Curry in school, he came to the class with lots of candles on day one. And he
Okay.
gave every boy a candle. And then he came and lit them and said, fix them on the table. And once they were lit, he says, now write what you observe. And people had to write for half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever the whole remaining class time, what they observed. So people wrote things like melting wax and blue flame, yellow flame, how it trickles down the side of the candle. You kept right. And people would stop with half a page. He'd say, no, keep going on and on. And so he taught you how to observe a dot, and in the dot, the difference in shade between the black and the darker areas. So the idea was to observe deeper and deeper. That was very, very important at least for a science student, but I believe for everybody in life, to observe.
That's a great learning actually from college. Okay, my next question then, can you give us 3 book recommendations around invention and IP that you think everybody will enjoy?
Invention and IP. I think if you take the field of IP, then my favorites used to be a book called McCarthy, because I like McCarthy first. Then I asked, when I was given a certain scholarship to go to the US and meet anybody I wanted to meet Professor McCarthy, met him, and I loved that book on trademarks.
Okay.
And Chisholm on patents, and Nimmer on copyrights, and Laddie Prescott and Vittoria on copyrights. This is the field. But apart from the field, there's a learning in every area. There's an IP learning. For example, Noam Chomsky's and Stephen Pinker's books on linguistics, they have a lot of IP content, surprisingly. Or even a thing like Algorithms to Live By, books like that, or Malcolm Gladwell's books, Tipping Point and so on. They have a lot of learning because they've got examples of how business entrepreneurs are doing their business and how sometimes they miscalculate and their data is misused and how data is protected. And so all those things are really linked up to IP. And I think my reading would therefore go all the way to that. Having said that, one book I'd like to mention, or two, which I really enjoyed reading in my life, was The Celestine Prophecy and The Alchemist. The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho, he was, of course, he is a great author, but The Celestine Prophecy was a book which I recommend to almost everybody.
Super. That's a lot of reading for everybody to do. So thank you for sharing those. I'm going to now ask you one more question, the last one, almost the last one. If you could make one thing that is currently legal, you have to move it to the illegal space, and one thing that's illegal but has to be legalized, specific to the IP realm, what would you swap?
IP realm I can't think of, but I can tell you the killing of animals in some countries where they actually pay and you can kill a lion and get a video shot and feel proud about it. That is the most cruel thing on earth. That should be made illegal.
Okay.
As far as something which is illegal to be made legal, there's a food that I thoroughly enjoy eating. I won't name the food, but I would love to eat it in my own country.
Okay,
And
fair.
you should understand.
Okay, that's a good one. So my last question then for you, and this one has ulterior motive. We would like to ask you, now that you've been through this chat show today called Unsuited, episode 5, who do you recommend as a guest for the show? Like, who do you think would do justice to a format like this, or who would you like to see on the show? Really?
I'd love to see my favorite judge, Rohinton Nariman, Justice Nariman, if it's possible. Or if it's meant for law firm heads, then somebody like Lakshmi Kumaran.
Okay.
Yes.
We've made a note of those, and we are going to probably reach out to them with your reference. So thank you. So there, I'm just going to quickly check if there are any questions for you. Akash, Vikas, do we want to take any questions that we would like for Sir to answer from the audience?
Yeah, I think you could answer a couple. I think that's a good way to end the
Sure.
program.
So someone's asking, how old is your firm and how long have you been practicing?
The firm is about 96, 23. So that makes it 97 years old, 97.
Wow.
In August, on the 15th of August, we'll turn 97. We were founded on the 15th of August, much before India became independent. That date was the 1923 date.
Okay.
I've been practicing since the 3rd of August, 1979. 41 years.
Wow. Okay. Wow, that's a lot of time spent doing what you love, and I think that's just luck. So that's great. Okay, someone's asking, how was your academic life? Were you a good student or were you average?
So up to class 5, I used to come 43rd out of 45 students, right at the bottom. And then it rose. Suddenly, when the change came, I came 4th in class. And after that, it was in the top 3 or 4.
Okay.
And in college, we were competing for the university ranking. And it was 1, 2, or 3. But there was a girl in Miranda House who we could never defeat. She would always come first.
Okay. Okay, there's another question for you. Can you suggest some tips for being a successful lawyer?
Be straightforward to the court. Don't fool the court, because your credibility is more important than your intelligence, your hard work, your preparation, the strength of your case, your facts. The most important is your credibility. You don't have credibility, you have nothing. Don't fool the court. Be straightforward and clear and clean to the court and to your opponent. Be fair to your opponent. Those values. Those values are the most important. So if you think that you can kind of conceal this fact or keep this away, it'll leak out. And so not only is it a bad practice, but it'll destroy you and your credibility.
Okay. The next question then, when you meet an inventor or a creator, they're all over the place in terms of patents on that invention. What do you do to structure those discussions towards the real patenting and specifics around it?
So you have to play a friend to the inventor or the creator. You start to criticize him, he'll run away because he needs a friend. So at that time, you have to, even if he's got something which is crazy, you have to understand, you have to give him time. You have to make him discover that it's crazy himself through that dialogue. And perhaps try to find out what, if he's made something, how could you describe it or portray it in a patent claim which would make it protectable. So very often patent attorneys themselves are inventors. Why? Because they are the ones who chisel out from the raw material the real true invention.
Correct. Okay. The next question then, name someone that you've met with who is probably really very famous, whether an inventor or a creator, like somebody very, very famous. the most famous person you've met with, maybe?
Well, I would say the Dalai Lama or Bill Gates, or I would say the Dalai Lama would be somebody whose feet I would kiss every day.
Wow, wow. Lovely. Okay, so I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so very much, Mr. Pravin Anand, for being with us this evening, for being so candid and just so enjoyable as a conversationalist. It's been really, really interesting talking to you.
Sorry about my hair, and
Lockdown, don't
I've
worry.
not been able to lock down. And so yesterday I had a wonderful meeting with my college mates after some 20, 30 years.
Right.
And we kind of got together on because of Zoom, and 6 of us. And I found 2 groups of people, all of them except me and one more. 2 of us had hair. He had moderate, I had huge, and the others were all balding. So it's pushed us into either you lose or you become wild like me.
That is absolutely fine. It is lockdown, and I don't think anyone's been looking at the hair. We've just been enjoying the conversation so much. So thank you very much. We've been honored to have you this evening, and yes, I hope the audience has enjoyed this conversation as much as you and I have. Thank you once again. You have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll be logging off now. Have a great Sunday evening. Thanks.